Joining us live to discuss, Republican Congressman Mike McCaul of Texas. He's the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He just got back from a congressional trip to the Polish border with Ukraine. Congressman, thanks for joining us. We have some images of you meeting with U.S. armed forces while you were there. How has the situation changed on the ground since your last visit to the region in March?
Well, you know, I was there 3 weeks ago. 100,000 refugees were pouring into Poland every day. 3 weeks later, hardly any refugees are coming into Poland, but rather a lot of unmarked 18-wheeler trucks going into Ukraine from Poland. That's some good news because those are weapons going into Ukraine to help the Ukrainians win this fight that they must win. And it's, you know, I've been critical. We should have gotten these in sooner, but I was very pleased to see that. In addition, the 82nd Airborne now is surrounded by basically a Patriot battery system, which will harden that target that we know the Russians want to go after.
You also met with the leadership of Romania on your trip just days before Russia ended up testing this new intercontinental ballistic missile. How nervous are European leaders right now?
You know, very, because if you're in Poland or Romania, you know the Russians better than anybody. They're very worried still about Odessa, that Putin will not give up. And that's what we heard from the Prime Minister of Romania, who was Secretary of Defense previously, that he's all in. This is going to be something he's going to put everything he has to extend this land bridge even past Crimea to Odessa. Then he could go into Moldova, where he has 8,000 troops there, and then they're up on the border of Romania. That's the worst case scenario. The good news is that the Ukrainians were able to down a major Russian ship, you know, off the coast in the Black Sea with their own anti-ship. And the UK is now sending a lot of anti-ship weapons that are far superior to what they were using. So that gives us some hope.
The regional military governor of Luhansk, which is in the Donbass region, tells CNN that 80% of his region's territory, 80%, is under Russian control. And he warns, quote, Russia is certainly not going to stop here. And he says, quote, there is no safe town in Ukraine. You've said that Ukraine can win this war if its fighters get the weapons they need. Do you still believe that, and are they getting those weapons?
I do think they can win this. I think the Russians overplayed their hand. I think they have demonstrated incompetence. And I think an important point, Jake, is that, you know, when I asked, are these the same worn-out troops that evacuated Kyiv, went up through Belarus to go around to east of Donbass to then go in? The answer is yes. They don't have any fresh recruits coming in. These are the same demoralized Russian troops. But the Ukrainians need these weapons to win this thing, and that's why it's so paramount that we ship them in. I'm glad the president has drawn down on the $800 million that we appropriated in Congress to help them win this fight. There's really too much at stake here now for Ukraine to lose this war.
Multiple sources tell CNN the U.S. is prepping another $800 million weapons package for Ukraine if approved. This would bring the total U.S. assistance to some $3.4 billion since the invasion began in February. How long can the U.S. keep that up? Are these weapons infusions sustainable? Do European partners need to do much, much more?
They do. I would argue that NATO is stepping up to the plate. The eastern flank of NATO, remember they're on the east side that are next to Russia. They have a lot of Russian weapons that they're dumping into Ukraine. And then it's incumbent upon NATO and the United States to backfill these orders. That could be another program you and I could talk about in terms of our supply chain with respect to these weapons. But that's the current state. We have to bring Patriot battery systems into, say, Slovakia, as they put in the S-300 that's anti-aircraft, anti-missile, capability.
How concerned are you about any of this military hardware getting into the wrong hands once it crosses into Ukraine?
Yeah, that's always a concern. I sign off on all foreign military weapon sales. The good news here is that the Stinger missiles, we took out the very sensitive chip information. The Javelins are old. They're very old stockpile equipment. The S-300s are Russian. We would never put a Patriot battery system in there because we don't want the Russians to capture that. So everything we're throwing in really has no value, if you will, or new value to the Russians, which is the good news. I am worried about Mariupol, humanitarian-wise. We intercepted, and it was made public in the initial battle plans that we were briefed on in the classified space last fall, that killing civilians was part of their battle plan. And we saw that play out in Bucha, and I have no reason to believe that's not going to change in Mariupol. And I think when the dust clears, you're going to see a lot of really awful atrocities taking place, which is why I passed my war crimes bill on the House floor last week.
CNN's reporting that the U.S. military is keeping a constant watch on Russia's nuclear arsenal, and that Secretary Austin is being briefed 2 or 3 times a week by the top U.S. general overseeing U.S. nuclear weapons and defenses. How much do you fear a worst-case scenario with Putin using nukes?
If he gets desperate, as I've said, like a scorpion backed into a corner. Remember, he's brought the butcher of Syria, who dropped barrel bombs and worked with Assad to drop chemical weapons on the civilian population in Syria. This is very disturbing that now the butcher of Syria has been tasked to deal with the Donbass. I worry that we could see chemical weapons. We know they've dropped a lot of really bad stuff, thermobaric bombs into the Ukraine and other weapons. But if they drop chemical, and if they use short-range tactical nukes, I think it changes this warfare altogether. In fact, this was an issue we brought up with NATO in Brussels, is how much can we sit back and watch before we react and take action? And we don't want this to happen, but it would escalate the war, and I hope he doesn't do this. But as a matter of desperation, we have to be prepared, and we have to have these discussions.
House Foreign Affairs Ranking Republican Mike McCaul of Texas, thanks so much. Good to see you as always. Coming up.